Welcome to the NHL Wraparound podcast featuring Neil Smith, President General Manager of the 1994 Stanley Cup champion New York Rangers, and longtime ESPN NHL veteran Vic Morren. Together, they share no-nonsense opinions on news and issues around the National Hockey League. Whether you're a casual or diehard fan, each episode of NHL Wraparound will leave you more informed. Now, here's your hosts, Neil and Vic.
This is NHL Wraparound presented by UBS Financial Services, Inc. Vic Morren, Neil Smith. It is Wednesday, March 18th, 2026. Every so often, we like to go north of the border, Neil, and take the pulse of what's going on in Canada with their team, some of their players. We had Craig Button on during the playoffs last year for all 4 rounds, had a great time with him, and we are going to welcome him back to touch on some of the things going on in Canada shortly.
When you live in Canada and you're in the media and you're working for TSN, the knowledge that you have of what's going on dwarfs what we have living south of the border. So I'm really looking forward to that.
One of the items that we are going to touch on with Craig starts are 3 things you need to pay attention to. And late Tuesday, it came down that Oilers superstar Leon Draisaitl will miss the rest of the regular season after getting hit by Ozzy Weisblad of the Nashville Predators on Sunday. We'd even said on short shifts on Monday that just kind of the language coming out after the game didn't make this seem like it was going to be a short-term injury.
No, it didn't sound like it was going to be. And you're right. They make the announcement that he's going to be out for the rest of the regular season, which is going to put a lot of pressure on the rest of the team to try to find their way into first in the Pacific Division, albeit a weak division, and try to get ahead of both Vegas and the Ducks, much less, stay ahead of Seattle and LA and San Jose. I have no doubt that the Edmonton Oilers are going to make it even without Leon, but it's going to be a harder time, certainly without his almost every game goal scoring.
And we'll do the deeper dive with Craig in terms of what the Oilers may or may not need to do in order to secure that playoff berth. Item number 2. Guess who came back on Monday for the Pittsburgh Penguins? That being Evgeny Malkin. After serving that 5-game suspension for high sticking or slashing or whatever you want to call it against Rasmus Dahlin of the Buffalo Sabres, he scores 2 goals and an assist in a 7-2 win for the Penguins in Denver. When Evgeny Malkin plays and Sidney Crosby doesn't, during the course of his career, the Penguins have a .633 winning percentage. His points per game average, 1.30, and that's better than the 1.10, obviously, that he's accumulated over the course of his career. Malkin has now said that he is in a space where he would like to play 1, maybe 2 more years. And if you go back to the start of the season when we had the Penguins written off before they even dropped the puck on opening night, and they were going to trade Sidney Crosby, and who knows what was going to happen with Malkin. Boy, what a renaissance season.
It really is, and it's part of the reason why the Penguins are in the playoff picture, and we didn't see that coming, mostly because you go by what happened the year before. But Malkin, he's got a little bit of the water that was in that movie Cocoon, I guess, because he's back to playing like he did a few years ago. I know we're going to get into this suspension stuff later, but I had to look twice when I saw that Malkin, with no injury to Rasmus Dahlin, came back after a 5-game suspension that he got for, slugging Dahlin with a stick. Yeah. And Dahlin never missed a minute. And we later will talk about Ratko Gudas, who put out Auston Matthews for the rest of the season, and his penalty was a 5-game suspension. It's sort of mind-boggling, but I know we're going to get to that later on.
And therein lies the inconsistencies that drive people crazy.
Absolutely.
Item number 3. Dallas and Colorado will play on Wednesday night. The top 2 teams in the Central Division. Colorado leads by 3 points, and they have played 1 fewer game than the Stars. But I also want to tie Smith's picks into this because you were 3-0 on Monday. And the last 2 games of the night were Utah and Dallas, where the Stars had not lost a game in regulation in 55 days and were on a 14-0-1 run. And the Colorado Avalanche playing at home to the Pittsburgh Penguins. And those 2 teams combined to lose by a collective score of 13-4. Utah winning in Dallas and the Penguins in Denver. And my bigger point here is the Avalanche, after that 31-2-7 start, have in effect played 500 hockey over the last 26 games. 13-11-2. That's not a small sample size. So give me your area of concern for Colorado if you have one.
Well, I do have a concern for them that they've got to get going again. This might be good for them heading into the playoffs, that they've gone through a bad period and they're going to find a way out of it. And so they hit some adversity before the playoffs start. You don't want to go through a whole regular season with no adversity, because adversity will come in the playoffs. It comes to everybody. But this game might also get one of these 2 teams right on track. These are 2 top teams. If Colorado wins a game, they obviously go even further in front. If Dallas wins a game, they're breathing down Colorado's neck. So one team is going to straighten themselves out, it seems like, when these 2 top teams play each other.
Well, I think with Dallas, that was probably more of a one-off. And we had listened on Monday to Darryl Ray saying that there were some chinks in the armor that we were starting to see. And how often does that happen during a long winning streak, that bad habits start to creep into your game because maybe things are coming too easy? So that 4-goal third period by the Mammoth is just something that maybe is a good wake-up call for them going into this game with the Avs.
Oh, absolutely. And I'm sure that Gulletson addressed that the next day of practice. It's going to be a great game, this game between Colorado and Dallas. I can't wait to see it.
You also remember that their previous game against Detroit, they had a 2-0 lead and wound up having to win that in overtime after letting that lead get away from them. But before we wrap this up, I want to get back to Colorado for a second. And you were talking about adversity and finally hitting a little bit of a dry patch here. I mean, their recent record over their last 8 or 10 games wouldn't necessarily indicate that record-wise, but you can see that this is not the team that has been quite as dominant as they were earlier in the season. They do have 4 forwards out, so they are waiting for those players to come back. But their collective team defense has been a little bit alarming, and that is something that you and I talked about earlier in the season. But in facing this adversity, I go back 3 years to the Boston Bruins, who had the record-setting season in terms of wins and points, and they never really faced that during the entire regular season. And then Florida came in and punched them in the face in the first round.
And did it late in the first round. I think that makes your point even stronger, is that don't forget that the Boston Bruins had no adversity all regular season, and then we're cruising with a 3-1 lead in games over Florida Panthers when the Panthers, as you said, punched them in the face with 3 straight wins and moving on. And Boston went home with the record-setting season. So it's something that I'm sure Jared Bednar is aware of. I'm sure it's something that he talks about. The other thing is, late in the season, the Colorado Avalanche don't take anybody by surprise. Not that they should have in the beginning of the season, but I don't think any of us knew that they'd be as dominant as they started this season and blowing through the league night after night.
Great test, great game. TNT will have it on Wednesday evening. And that will wrap up 3 things you need to pay attention to. Now let's welcome in Craig Button from TSN.
Coming to us from Calgary, Alberta, a good friend, an old friend, not in age, but an old friend in time of friendship, is Craig Button, and been on the show before. And Craig, thank you for doing this. Thank you for coming back on after having done it once. You would have thought you ran for the hills and didn't want to do it anymore. But we're glad to have you on here. Yeah, we know you're in Canada, and I follow you on TV, see you all the time, and I'm so happy that we got to do this.
I am too, Neil, and there's no running for the hills. It's waiting for the call to come back. So I'm glad you called me back. So I'm very happy, and the friendship is long and it's enduring, and it extends even before me to my father, and you and my father had a friendship. So it's something that I value and cherish, and I appreciate you.
Well, I think about Jack every time I see you on TV, and that's the honest truth. I do. I see him right in my head, and see him with the glasses and, scouting for David Poyle. And I have great memories of learning through people like your dad and other people when we were on the scouting trail back then. So you're living in Canada. Canada's a little bit of a mess NHL-wise, other than, otherwise really trying hard to get into the playoffs. They're working their butts off and that. And Montreal is up there. It looks like they've got a playoff position. But after that, the 5 other teams are a little bit of a mess, and we won't go through every single one of them, but the one that I think everybody expected would win a Stanley Cup at some point, and not to mention the fact that they've been in the finals the last 2 years in a row, would be the Edmonton Oilers with their more than generational player, a league generational player in Connor McDavid, perhaps a definite generational player in Leon Draisaitl, and other great players on their team too. But the Oilers have gone into dysfunction, and maybe you can tell us what you're thinking. We've got Draisaitl out for the rest of the regular season. Still got a huge goaltending question there. For the life of me, I don't understand. Maybe you can explain what Stan Bowman was doing. And then we've got the Chris Knobloch situation and the Paul Coffey coming back on the scene situation. Is there any way to throw a lasso around all that and straighten it out?
Well, I think I'll try. I want to rewind and go back to your own experiences, Neil. In the 92-93 season, your New York Rangers, who had some pretty good talented players on it, missed the playoffs.
Right.
And it wasn't because you didn't have good players. And you knew you had good players, but you looked at the structure of your team and you said, we need more of this and more of that. You didn't have to go get the high end. You had to go support those guys. And, we talk about the depth and we see it. And people say, well, the salary cap there is different. I don't think it's any different in how you have to build your team. You need certain types of players to play certain roles, and they have to carry that out. I mean, the Florida Panthers didn't win the Stanley Cup two years in a row without the depth that they had all the way through their lineup. So that's my quick answer. And you've experienced that, and then you built, and then within a year you say, well, you're Stanley Cup champions. And it was the maneuvers you made, the additions you made to support those high-end players. So I look at the Edmonton Oilers, and my rewind goes back to the summer of 2024. And they didn't match the offer sheets on Broberg and Holloway. They traded Ryan McLeod. They lost Warren Foegele. They traded Cody Ceci, who was a really good bottom pair and really good right shot defenseman. And then they brought in these little guys. They brought in Victor Arvidsson, and they brought in Jeff Skinner. And to me, and then they've been continuously chasing. They trade for Jake Wallman. You had Philip Broberg, who was the 8th overall pick. You had Dylan Holloway, a big, powerful guy who could play. And I think that even though they went to the final last year, I think they got some good fortune. I mean, fortune is they have 97 and 29, who are, as you point out, great players. And now they lose Corey Perry. And they just continue to, I think, chip away at the type of players and the strength you need to support that high end. I think it's unbelievable that Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl dragged them as far as they can. And now without Leon Draisaitl, I think it becomes a little bit harder. The goaltending was a situation where it felt like they made a change for change's sake. Mm-hmm. And Tristan Jarry's been terrible. And, now you're counting on Connor Ingram. And here to me is, and you know this, Neil, the players know, and they always know first. They know where the belief should lie. And the only saving grace, literally, and I'm not talking about goaltending, is that they're in the Pacific Division, and the Pacific Division is not very good. And the Edmonton Oilers might be able to find their way, and these two great players might be able to carry them, but they're further away from being a Stanley Cup contender. And my sense of it all is there's a lot of angst within the Edmonton Oilers organization with respect to Connor McDavid signed his contract. Is it 2 years? Is it 1 year? What is it? He wants to win. Leon Draisaitl wants to win. You're around Messier and those guys. They put demands on you, Neil. They didn't come up to you and threaten you with your life, but you knew the demands were there, and they expected you to do it. It's the same pressure that's on Stan Bowman and the management group now in Edmonton, and it's on the management. I don't think they're good enough to contend for a Stanley Cup.
And also within the Oilers, there's a difficulty at the very top. It's not an easy ownership in Edmonton. It isn't a total hands off, just do what you got to do type ownership, which I would imagine throws another layer of angst into the organization.
Well, Neil, you've worked in different organizations where you had ownership that said, "Okay, here's what we have. Here's what I expect you to do. Now go and do it." And then you have ownership, and I call it shadow cabinets. They have people advising, and you'd like to know who they are because you don't know who they are, but you know by the questions you get from the ownership or the president, and you're going, "Wait a second here, like that's not something we've talked about." And when I say shadow cabinet, they're anonymous. And I think that, you got, social media now, you got lots of people weighing in, lots of people talking, you should do this, you should do that. I always say there's a lot of experts without expertise out there telling you what you should be doing. and that exists in a lot of organizations. And I totally agree. I think that exists in Edmonton.
Well, and it does. I want to clarify and say just what you said. I think in 2026, it is in more organizations than it ever was in the past.
Yeah. Totally agree.
Craig, I want to bring this back on the ice for a second because currently the Oilers are tied with the Ducks for first in the Pacific, although the Oilers have played 2 more games. But when you look at this Draisaitl injury and now what the Oilers have to do to at least get this to the finish line and into the playoffs, and maybe they wind up winning this division. But is this an opportunity for the team to kind of reinvent itself a little bit? Because you remember that when Jay Woodcroft replaced Dave Tippett, they had real good attention to detail away from the puck initially. And then when Chris Knobloch took over for Woodcroft, you saw the same thing. And that has kind of gotten away from this team. In their win against San Jose on Tuesday, 13 different guys make the score sheet, 5 different goal scorers. Max Jones gets the winner. And so does this give them the opportunity to kind of redefine themselves without this superstar in the lineup for the last 4.5 weeks of the season?
Yes. But what happened, and I think it happened under Jay, and then Chris came in, and then it's kind of seeped back in under Chris, is that you run up against it, you dig a hole for yourself, and then you got these 2 great players to dig yourself out of the hole. Well, the other players now start to feel, okay, well, where's our responsibility? We got these guys. They'll dig us out. They'll get us out of the mess we created. And I think without Draisaitl, Chris has to go to more players. More players have to feel part of the group. And that, by extension, helps the group be more balanced, helps the group be more focused, right? Because all of a sudden you're looking, we better not dig a hole for ourselves. And Chris Knobloch knows it. So the players now have to be utilized in that manner to go out and play to the best of their capabilities and do exactly what you said, Vic. That is the silver lining in Leon Draisaitl's injury.
I want to move over to Toronto, Craig, for a minute because I like to go from one mess to the other. The biggest mess in Canada, certainly, and maybe in the league. Well, Rangers are sort of running neck and neck with them. But again, you did just a phenomenal job of explaining Edmonton. You really did. And can you do that good of a job of explaining the mess in Toronto? Because we could go up, down, and sideways, and it's all got to go into the blender, and where it comes out, I don't know. All I can say is that from a professional standpoint, I don't expect to see the same people there next year, and I hate to say that because I like those guys, and I really do, and I think they're good. I think Brad's a good executive, and Craig is a good coach, but I don't know. It's just everything that could go wrong has gone wrong.
Yes, it has. And I think it's a team that looks very similar to the one in 2014 that Brendan Shanahan took over. And uh, I have found myself more and more, and, at the risk of overusing it too much, Nathan McKinnon, following the gold medal loss in the Olympics to the U.S., said, you can't fight reality. And the reality for the Toronto Maple Leafs is, number one, they're not very good. They don't have prospects. They don't have draft picks. So what are you going to do? What Brendan Shanahan had a little bit of a benefit when he came in, and they had picks. Morgan Riley was the 5th overall pick in 2012. Nylander was the 8th overall pick in 2014. Marner was the 4th overall pick in 15. And then you had Matthews in 16 as the 1st overall pick. So you had all these. You had Kadri still on the team, who was, I believe, the 7th overall pick just a little bit before that. Toronto doesn't have any top picks. They've traded them all. And so you have Matthews and you have Nylander. Matthew Nyes is a good player. Every team in the league has 5-6 good players. You're not winning with just 5-6 good players. And the rest of it is just, Neil, it's a mess. And the prospect cupboard is empty. The draft picks, the draft selection drawer is, pretty empty. And so how are you going to get yourself out of it? They got themselves out of it and had this great run with all these players because they had picks and they had top 10 picks. Then they went through their pain. So like Brad Treliving, who I agree with you, good person and everything, you need a new vision here. And you need a vision. Mike Babcock ad nauseum said there's going to be a lot of pain. I think break out those same words because they're simply not good enough. I mean, they're signing goaltenders. I'm reading now they signed the Russian goaltender long-term, and this is what you get out of the media. Well, they're signing these goaltenders because they're going to trade goaltenders. Like, what?
Yeah.
Like, shouldn't you be trying to get goaltenders that can help your team? Like, it just seems that everything is convoluted there, and it feels right now like they are the classic case of the Coyote and the Roadrunner. And the Coyote never caught the Roadrunner. And it feels like they're right now thinking they're going to catch the Roadrunner. I think the next years for the Toronto Maple Leafs, if they don't recognize right now where they're at, it could look like the 80s for the Toronto Maple Leafs. And the 80s was not a memorable time for the Toronto Maple Leafs. That's how bad I think it is, Neil.
Harold Ballard all over again. One last thing about Toronto Maple Leafs in 30 seconds. They went from 100 and something point team last season that lost in the first round and everybody was disappointed. Then they lose Mitch Marner, which was a huge mistake on the organization's part. Letting that happen was unforgivable in my book. And then they made some moves to bring in players, I guess, that Craig liked. The team isn't anything like it was last season. And Vic and I have said to each other many times this year, it couldn't all just be losing Mitch Marner to go. It couldn't be, could it? And then the more people I talk to, well, yeah, it sort of is because he did so many things that he didn't get credit for that aren't there anymore. And what's your take on that?
I think they made him a scapegoat, Neil. I think they made him a scapegoat. And I think that Mitch got tired of being a scapegoat. He said, I'm out of here. I mean, this is a Toronto kid whose favorite team growing up was the Toronto Maple Leafs, who performed brilliantly for the Toronto Maple Leafs. And to your point, did so many things for the Toronto Maple Leafs. We're talking power play, penalty killing, Auston Matthews, offense, everything that went with it. And I know the people in Vegas and talking to them, they're just, they feel so lucky that they were able to get Mitch, and they're really amazed by the things that he's able to do. And they missed it. And so now, again, I go back to the players. You're looking, how do we lose Mitch Marner? Like he was a Leaf. He was a Leaf. It's like losing Daryl Sittler and Lanny McDonald. Like they're Leafs. Like they wear it proudly. And then this is what happens, and it's going to trickle down. I mean, it feels now that they're going to blame Auston Matthews for everything. Like Auston Matthews traded away the draft picks. Auston Matthews made their team slower. Auston Matthews said, "Get Mitch Marner out of here." And it feels more personal now in the Toronto media towards Auston Matthews, to the point where if Auston Matthews comes out and says, "Get me out of here," is anybody going to be surprised?
Well, I'm sure his days are numbered in the big smoke.
Yep, I agree, Neil. You can't replace these guys. You can't replace these guys. Look at how Boston traded Joe Thornton. And, Harry Sinden very well. And I remember sitting with him and Bob Gainey, and Harry said, yeah, we had to get him out of here. We were rash and we traded him out. And Bob Gainey says, yeah, well, he goes, your problem, Harry, was the guy on the other end of the line said yes. He goes, you were mad? Doug Wilson said, yeah, we'll make that trade. And Mitch Marner leaves, and somebody's going to say yes to Auston Matthews. You'd be crazy not to say yes to Auston Matthews.
Gosh, yes.
Let's keep Matthews in the discussion here because the general managers are wrapping up their meetings in Palm Beach, Florida. And, of course, we saw the incident that took place a week ago with Radko Gudas taking out Matthews' knee. He's gone for the rest of the season. Grade 3 MCL tear. And George Parros and his group coming under a lot of scrutiny for the length of this suspension, considering the fact that Gudas had been suspended 4 times already. Neil and I had spoken earlier this week about perhaps maybe having a schedule of suspensions, meaning you assign a degree of severity based on the incident and the injury, and then you couple that with the amount of times a player has previously suspended, and you have a grid with numbers plugged in of how many games a player should be suspended. So my first question is, would you be on board with something like that? Because Parros is saying all the right things, that we have good people and we're confident in the decisions that we're making. But it just doesn't appear to work.
I like the idea. And I think when Connor McDavid comes out and talks about the process, I think that's an idea that has a lot of merit in my view. And I know that the PA or the NHL and the department, they have sentencing guidelines. They do. I mean, that's as simple as that. And slowly, George and his group have raised the bar a little bit. 2 seasons ago, there were 6 suspensions handed out that were appealed by the PA. They were all upheld. There's a contradiction here. You have a player in Auston Matthews hurt on a knee incident, which everybody knows is an unnecessary play, shouldn't happen, right? Right. Then you have the PA arguing for less games. So the PA is arguing, like Judd Moldiver, who's Auston Matthews, is saying there should be more games, and the PA, who he's part of, are arguing for less games based on sentencing guidelines. And the PA is a big part of this. This is collectively bargained. So Gary and Neil and Vic, this. Gary doesn't want to be spending his time on appeals. So, yeah, you could give him 10 games and it's going to be appealed. And now that takes up more time. So you're trying to move it up. The players in the NHL and the players need to have a voice in this. They need to be able to say, no, we want this and we need to have more of this. I believe George and the Department of Player Safety are doing the best job they possibly can under the circumstances. And we can say, oh, he deserves more, throw the book at him, right? How many knee penalties have we had this year? So we have one, and now we say, oh, there's a big problem. I think they've done a really good job. But can we find ways to your idea to do it better? And that's what I think. I mean, Neil, you've been part of those meetings for years. And Brian O'Neill, I was talking to Gord Stellick, your former assistant. Brian O'Neill used to make all the decisions, right? And then, then it became collectively bargained. We need players, former managers, former players, former coaches, current coaches. Everybody has to come into there. And everybody has to say, we're accepting this as how we're going to move forward. And then I think we get to a standard and to a grid, to your point, that can work. And now everybody knows. And then you can have a little bit of a sliding scale. Okay. Yeah. That was a knee injury. It didn't cause injury, but this one did. So, if it's an injury, whatever, it's 8 games instead of 6 or however you want to do it. I like that idea. I think those are the things that have to be discussed, but they have to be discussed in a collaborative manner.
Also taking place at these GM meetings is the interpretation of goaltender interference, which is probably one of the most nebulous things going on in the NHL right now. And we had 2 really peculiar instances that have been brought to the forefront. One was the Saturday afternoon game between the Pittsburgh Penguins and the New York Rangers, and Anthony Mantha barely brushed Igor Shesterkin's skate, and a goal was disallowed. But this past weekend in the Anaheim-Ottawa game, we saw a play where goaltender Ville Husso was clearly run into. He was in his own crease, and the goal was allowed to stand. And Pat Verbeek brought this up to the entire room, and many agreed with him. Pierre LeBrun, your colleague, agreed with him. But yet the league said, you know what? We're okay with the official's decision here. And this is not okay. And I think something that is near and dear to you, the foot in the crease in 1999, the league was one goal away from getting out of that entire mess. And it's still a story today. And I think we could be headed down the same path where a Stanley Cup final game or the Stanley Cup itself is decided on one of these rulings.
I know Colin Campbell has always said, that when they look at certain aspects of the game, what would it look like in overtime of a game 7 in the Stanley Cup final? They go to that extent to say, how do we want this to look? A couple of things that I'll say is the Situation Room Hockey Ops, they now have a catalog of over 100 incidents that they distribute to all the teams and the coaches and the video coaches and everything, and said, these are the ones we've overturned. These are the ones that we've upheld. And the managers have been in the room, and I want to say in less than 5% of the cases that they've all agreed on what they've had. So I think that they've taken something that's gray and they've tried to make it a little less gray with some clarity. Does that mean that there's not going to be some errors? No. We see penalties called that shouldn't be a penalty. And what I see is, I don't see rampant goaltender interference. I don't see rampant challenges on goaltender interference, which tells me that the system is working to a certain degree. Like anything else, can we have it work better? Pat Verbeek, because it happened to him, and now it just happens to coincide with the GM's meetings, all of a sudden now, this is an issue. Well, I would ask everybody, go back and tell me where the issue is. And every single team gets these catalog of video reviews on a regular basis. That's why you're seeing less and less challenges, because they're going, well, that didn't get overturned, or that one was upheld. So hockey ops, they have worked really hard with the managers and got consensus from the managers. When I say less than 5% of the cases, they agree on all of them. They agree. I think last year it was 54 of 56 they agreed on. That they said, and that's the work they've done. I don't see a problem. I think the media have made a big thing about it, and the media need to get clicks, and the media needs to have people read their stuff. And I totally disagree with Pierre LeBrun. I don't think it's a problem. And I don't think it's a problem. Let me tell you a quick little story that you'll laugh at, and it involves Pat Verbeek. In the 1999 conference final, we had a goal disallowed against Colorado. Pat Verbeek scored it. It was almost the exact same play that Brett Hall scored on the Stanley Cup final. Bob Gainey asked clarification from Colin Campbell. Colin Campbell wrote a memo describing that this play called continuation is a good goal. And here's Pat Verbeek all these years later talking about goaltender interference. There's a coincidence. There's an irony. It's just, as much as things change, maybe they don't. But I really believe that the hockey ops have made significant progress in the area that is very difficult. And don't get me wrong, I'm not trying to say this is easy. And I thought that Colin Campbell, in his comments at the GM's meeting, said it's like a snowflake. Yeah, it's a snowflake, but not everyone is the same. And I think they found a way, and they continue to try to find ways to make it less and less gray. It's always going to be gray, but I think they're working towards to make it less gray.
Craig, when there is a challenge on a goaltender interference, it's challenged by the teams. We all know that. They've got a video guy that does nothing else but watch the game on video to make sure he gets the bench informed of what's going on. I really don't know the answer to this. When the referees go over there and put the headsets on because there's a goaltender interference challenge, who's making that decision? Is it Toronto, the War Room, or is it those referees that are on the ice?
Well, they're showing the referees the play, and they want the referees' input. But I think the number one thing is the call on the ice matters, and they don't want the referees like saying, "Well, we'll just kind of be in the middle here, and you make the decision there." They want the referees to make a decision, and the Situation Room does not want to overturn calls on the ice unless it warrants it. So they want the referees included in it. What did you see? Here's what you're looking at now. Here's what we're looking at. You might have been blocked out from seeing this angle. What do you think about it now? How do you feel about the call being overturned? Again, it's a collaboration. So, there's communication, but the NHL situation do not want to overturn calls on the ice. They want that responsibility with the referees, and they put that responsibility to them. And they've even said, like, hey, listen, call a 2-minute penalty. Disallow the goal and don't call a penalty. Just say it's incidental contact or call a 2-minute interference penalty. And again, I think that collaboration is something that works towards getting the best outcome, the best decision.
So ultimately, when you see the referees go over there and put the headsets on, ultimately it's their decision of whether they're going to overturn it or not, helped by and guided by the help of the Situation Room.
Yes.
Okay, so that clears that up, because there are people out there, and there's a lot of them, that think that Toronto makes that call. And I have actually said, well, then why bother having them put the headsets on if Toronto's going to make the call? Just let them wait and let Toronto call it in. So
exactly.
So anyway, I'm glad you clarified that. Gosh, you've clarified so many things here. I don't know where to start.
Well, I think, Neil, the one good thing, too, is, again, collaboration, showing the officials, hey, here's what we're seeing. They have to call that in real time. They get one look at it.
Yeah.
So trying to give them a look and saying, hey, what do you see here? Okay, would you change your call if this was here? And so, yeah, okay, yeah. And again, and they sometimes, Colin said it at the GM's meetings as well. He goes, we're hostage to TV on the angle. So sometimes it takes a little bit longer than we want, but that usually says that we're not as sure as we'd like to be. And, trying to go through the discussion with the officials. And the officials are top notch. Yeah. What I like the fact is, don't be afraid to change your mind based on what you saw. And if you need a little guidance to do that, then let's have it that way.
Before we let you go, Craig, one more piece of clarification that we could use from you is the mystery around Elias Pettersson. And, of course, last night against Florida, scored 2 goals, his first goals since the 13th of January. He's in the second year of an 8-year deal, paying him at $11.6. And I had posed to Neil a few weeks ago that perhaps this is a guy that should be bought out, because I'm not sure what his future is in Vancouver. Has he already reached his ceiling there? And if you're in the GM seat or the ownership seat, what are you doing with this player?
Well, I think you have to, for me, you look at it through the lens of your team. Now, listen, it's not very good when you're the manager that signed the guy to the contract you did, and then you go to the owner and you say, hey, by the way, I think we'd like to buy him out. And the owner says, what does that mean? Who gave him the contract, right? Like, that's the end game, I think, here with Elias Pettersson. The management in Vancouver said we weren't going to retain any salary. I think they were just waiting till the offseason to see if they can trade him. And so when you look at what the cost of a buyout would be as opposed to the cost of retaining some salary in a trade, it's going to be less retaining salary. And they're smart people. They're going to look at it and go, okay, we have to retain some because you're mitigating your losses on Elias Pettersson. But when I talk about the Vancouver Canucks, like, he's not a functioning player for the Vancouver Canucks. He's not a leader for the Vancouver Canucks. So you have to look at it through the lens of the Vancouver Canucks. I think his time is done there. And I think the Vancouver Canucks have to affect change in that regard. Do I think Elias Pettersson can be a 65, 70-point player in the league? Yeah. Would I be willing to take a chance on him at less money? Yes. But for the Vancouver Canucks, I think the decision is already cast, and I think they know it.
Greg, you've helped us sitting there in Canada. You've really helped us sort out a couple of teams in Canada, 3 teams actually. And we haven't even touched on a Canadian team that last year won the President's Trophy and this year is going to miss the playoffs, and that's the Winnipeg Jets. So we're going to hold that for you for another time so we can let you out of here. And then we're also going to come back to you to straighten out the Calgary Flames and what Don Maloney and Craig Conroy are doing in that regard. But we're going to leave that for another day, and we're going to thank you for coming in today and being here with us and spending this time and helping our listeners and viewers understand what the heck is going on in Toronto and Edmonton and Vancouver. So it's been great. Thank you.
My pleasure. Yeah, my pleasure. Thanks for having me. I look forward to our next time.
Well, hopefully we'll get you on for some playoff predictions. You're a neutral guy.
I love doing that with you, Neil. Yeah. I love doing that with you.
That was a lot.
Vic, I love doing it.
I got to tell you, Vic and I had a lot of fun with you with that stuff, and we're looking forward to that again.
Me too.
And a reminder that you're listening to NHL Wraparound presented by UBS Financial Services, Inc. Neil, it never seems to be enough time that we have with Craig Button, because I think the reality is we could have a 3-hour show with him and still not cover everything that we would want to.
You know, the thing I really enjoy about Craig is that he has fun and he really enjoys doing the show and he enjoys the banter. And he is an extremely knowledgeable guy with a great historical recall. And that's what makes him so good on TV. He can go into these things in depth. And I'm sure there's a lot of viewers that watch TSN that just go, oh, I never thought of that. Oh, I never thought of that. Oh, I never thought of that. It's really fun. And that time goes by so quickly when you're talking to Craig.
And he turns the prism in different ways. And I was kind of surprised that he was that outspoken about Pierre LeBrun and his feelings on the goaltender interference. And he believes that it is fine. And he says it with conviction.
He does. And you know what? It's great. It's great to hear that. You like to hear all different angles and all different opinions on it. And you get some insights, I did anyways, from him that I didn't know about. And that's what's great about this show, is that we get people on here who have a very wide knowledge base, and it can add to the knowledge that we might think we have.
It's always a learning experience. Not only for us, and of course, we hope for our listeners as well.
Absolutely.
So let's scrub down the standings as we enter play on Wednesday. Eastern Conference first, Atlantic Division. Buffalo gets a 2-0 win in Vegas. On Tuesday night, Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen with a shutout. They lead Tampa Bay by 4 points, although the Lightning have played 2 fewer games. The Lightning with a 6-2 win in Seattle Tuesday. Nikita Kucherov, a hat trick and 2 assists. They are followed by the Montreal Canadiens, who have 84 points. So it's Buffalo 90, Tampa Bay 86, Montreal 84, Metropolitan Division, Carolina 90, Pittsburgh and the Islanders with 83 apiece. Then behind them in the wild card, Boston and Detroit. Identical records with 14 games left to play with 82 points. The Columbus Blue Jackets, unbelievable heater that they have been on since Rick Bowness has taken over that team. They are 16-2-4 with Bowness, and they are 1 point out of a wild card spot, and they have played 1 fewer game than both the Bruins and the Red Wings.
They've also played 1 fewer game than the Islanders. And the Islanders are a team that if they can catch them, they move right into that 3rd spot in the Metro Division. So the Islanders beating Toronto in Toronto kept them going, but they can't take their foot off the gas at all because Columbus is coming so strong, and they're gunning for them.
I just want to ask you, did you see the fight between Nick Delorier and Matthew Olivier in that Carolina-Columbus game?
I did see that, and it looked like 2 guys that said, you know what, we got to do this. We got to do this. We got to do it. And it was a heck of a heavyweight match. And at the end, Delorier patted Olivier on the helmet as they broke the fight up.
I got to tell you something, that when they were going at it, that was the thing that I was waiting for, because these are two guys. They know what their roles are. There is a respect between combatants in this, and especially super heavyweights like this was. And I was just waiting for the pat on the head, and they didn't disappoint. And then when Delorier got to the penalty box, that right hand looked like hamburger.
Well, this is a thing that I chuckle at to myself all the time, is these guys that fight these days with shields on, I mean, they're just smashing their hand into that plastic, blow after blow. It's a tough way to earn a living. Olivier reminds me of Probert because he's got good hands. He can score goals. He can play the game. Not to say Delorier can't, but he's not at that level that Olivier's at as far as skill level. Olivier has made a real place for himself on that Columbus Blue Jackets. They just re-signed him not too long ago. And boy, he puts the fear of God in a lot of players out there on other teams.
Had a career high in goals a season ago and up to 13 again this year. But before we leave the East, Ottawa Senators 7-1-2. In their last 10, 77 points, but they've only played 66 games. So they can make up ground still, but they're going to have to stay hot. And the two teams that are really getting knobbed out of all of this are the Philadelphia Flyers and the Washington Capitals, who have 74 points. But when you see Pittsburgh winning, the Islanders winning, Boston picking up points, Detroit won their last game, Columbus and Ottawa keep winning, there's no runway left.
No, and there's a big game, though, that's going to be the two nations' capitals going at it when Ottawa plays in Washington. That'll be a big one. Every game is big now for the teams you've just mentioned, every single game. And I got to give them all credit. They've all got the pedal to the metal right now, and they're going at it. I mean, Columbus last night, it was a fantastic win to beat Carolina Hurricanes the way they did. And it's just great hockey to watch.
Great pick by you, by the way.
Oh, I didn't want to break my arm patting myself on the back for that, so I'm glad you did it.
Yeah, well, I'll bring you back to earth at the end of the show. Central Division. Colorado 97, Dallas 94. And as we mentioned earlier, Colorado with one game in hand on the Stars. They will meet in Denver on Wednesday night. Minnesota Wild third with 90 points. Pacific Division, Anaheim and Edmonton tied 77 points apiece. Anaheim, 2 fewer games played. And the Vegas Golden Knights are third, 76 points after their loss against Buffalo at home on Tuesday. Wild card. First spot, Utah looks pretty comfortable right now, 76 points. But here's where it gets wild. Seattle and Los Angeles, both with 71 points. Seattle with the tiebreaker, placed in wild card 2. San Jose lost in Edmonton, so they have 70 points. However, they have played one fewer game than the Kraken and the Kings. Behind them, Nashville with 69 points, Winnipeg with 67. So I still see a lot of jockeying for position going on there over the final 4.5 weeks of the regular season.
As we always say, a winning streak or a losing streak at this time of year will certainly decide your fate really quickly.
Here's something that's already been decided. The World Cup of Hockey, as we had said on Monday, has now been formally announced for February of 2028. And the host cities, Calgary, Edmonton, and Prague. And Rogers Place in Edmonton will host both semifinals and the final. 28 cities made bids to be part of the World Cup, with 10 of them in Europe. This will be a 17-day shutdown of the NHL. And we talked about this the other day, Neil, that when you couple this with an 84-game regular season now, players are going to get banged up because the Olympic break was 19 days. This is 17 days and 2 more games that will be added onto the NHL slate for each team. So, as we've said, hockey's going to be great, but it is going to come at a price.
Absolutely. And these players love playing in these international tournaments. Vic, I got to be honest with you. How many of these international things are we going to have? We got the Olympics. We've got the Four Nations tournament that has only NHL players playing in it. We've seen that. It was great. We've seen World Cup of Hockey before, and it's great. But, I mean, that's 3 different international tournaments that we're seeing being played during NHL seasons. And are we ever going to get back to just having an NHL season again without these international tournaments interrupting the schedule?
The answer to that is no, because there's going to be best on best. And here's a reality check here. Probably long after both of us are gone, these are going to happen every 2 years. Pure and simple. It's going to be Olympics and then another best on best, World Cup, Four Nations, whatever you want to call it. But the interesting thing here is that this is going to be an 8-nation tournament. But none of the nations were officially announced. And you've got to believe that perhaps it wasn't done so because I think the NHL and the IHF have to come to some sort of an agreement on what's going to be with Russia.
That is true. That's one thing. And so we're going to have to wait on that. There is no international hockey. Just to clarify what I was saying, there is none slated for 2027. There is an all-star game slated for 2027 at UBS Arena, the home of the New York Islanders. And we'll see what kind of format that takes, because we all know, compared to this international tournaments that we've been watching, the Four Nations, the Olympics, the World Cup, all-star games suck. They're just horrific. You don't even want to watch them. They're so bad. So we'll see what kind of format the NHL and the PA come up with to try to make it watchable hockey.
You and I might be there. So maybe that's reason enough for people to tune in.
Oh, well, if they could see us, well, then I'm sure they'll want to go.
Personnel notes. Kirby Dach for the Montreal Canadiens out 2 to 4 weeks with an upper body injury. He was hit on Sunday by Jeffrey Viel of the Anaheim Ducks in that loss for the Canadiens. This is a guy that, to me, it's almost like he's coming off like Philip Hedl on the eastern side of Canada right now, because during the course of his career, he has only played in about 48% of the possible games that he could have. Remember, he had one season where he played, I think, a number of games in the teens, and then there was another that he played only 2 games for the entire season. And this is a player that just appears to be very prone to injury.
And you know what? And that's what somebody said about the problem with having an injury-prone player is they get injured. And I think Kirby Dach is one of them. Poor guy. I mean, he can't help it. He's getting hurt. You know, maybe the Philip Hedl thing is a whole different thing with those concussions. I'll move on, but Kirby Dach, yeah, hopefully he'll find himself into good health sooner or later.
For the Ottawa Senators, defenseman Nick Jensen out indefinitely with meniscus surgery. On the plus side, Jake Sanderson, who has been out with an upper body injury since getting hit by the Kraken's Brandon Montour last week. He is expected to begin skating again next week. LA Kings' Adrian Kempe missed Monday's win at Madison Square Garden with a lower body injury that was apparently sustained in warmups. He is listed day to day, as is Joel Eriksson-Ek for the Minnesota Wild, who missed their overtime win in Chicago on Tuesday. Buffalo Sabres' Zach Benson left Tuesday's win in Vegas. I'm not sure if you saw this hit that Braden McNabb laid on him in open ice. Initially, there was a penalty given. It was reviewed. No penalty, clean hit, but Benson left the ice holding his shoulder. We don't want to speculate, but it didn't look good.
No, it didn't. And he's not a big guy, Zach Benson. So we'll see. It certainly looked like a separated shoulder, the way his body language was.
I just told you we don't speculate.
I said it certainly looked like. I didn't say I speculated. I said it looked like.
Well, all right. And if you're correct, then I will say I stand corrected. Oh, there you go.
Okay.
Sam Bennett and Seth Jones both came back into the Florida lineup in their 5-2 loss at Vancouver on Tuesday. But the truth is the Panthers are still missing 7 other players out of their lineup. And I think that when we look at this team from game to game, we kind of think more that they are still defending Stanley Cup champions than the actual lineup that Paul Maurice is able to put on the ice each night.
Yeah, I mean, whenever you're the Stanley Cup champs, you're going to be given the benefit of the doubt the next season every time you step on the ice. Everybody's going to expect that you're going to win every game, no matter who's out, because everybody thinks so much of you from watching you go all the way through the playoffs and win the Cup. And I think that's the case with the Florida Panthers. I know I thought they'd win in Vancouver last night, and they didn't, but they are seriously banged up, and I'm sure they realize that they're going to have this year's playoffs off and be able to recuperate.
There was a nice moment before that game because making his Florida Panthers debut was Nolan Foote on the back line, and he is the son of Canucks head coach Adam Foote. And Nolan had previously played 30 games over the course of 5 seasons with the Devils, and they exchanged a hug at center ice around the benches before the game started.
And just to clarify, because I needed to have this clarified to me, this is not Cal Foote. Cal Foote is
Correct.
The other son of Adam Foote, who was in that problem in London, Ontario, with the World Junior team and went through the trials. This is Nolan Foote, and it was really nice to see the embrace that him and his dad had before the game.
A couple of nice returns also. On Tuesday, Nick Foligno returned to the United Center for the first time since his trade from the Chicago Blackhawks. He, of course, the former captain in Chicago. And Artemi Panarin returned to Madison Square Garden and came out a winner as the Kings beat the Rangers. But after the game, Anze Kopitar, who, as we've mentioned, going through his final pass through all the NHL arenas, was greeted by the Rangers at center ice, and the last person online, none other than backup goaltender Jonathan Quick. And, of course, those two shared Stanley Cups together in 2012 and 2014.
And it was a great embrace, great photo moment for those two. I'm sure they're going to cherish that picture, and just really good, and probably the end of both their careers at the end of this season. Although, like you said, we don't speculate.
We don't. And that will wrap up our show for today. Thanks to Craig Button from TSN for joining us. And thanks to UBS Financial Services, Inc. NHL Wraparound and UBS Financial Services, Inc. are not affiliated. UBS Financial Services, Inc. is a sponsor of NHL Wraparound. No other affiliation, relationship, or endorsement is made, suggested, intended, or should be implied or inferred between UBS and NHL Wraparound or any of the individuals or businesses and or their respective products and services appearing in this program.
Let me take a moment to thank everybody out there that's listening right now or that's viewing on YouTube. If you want, please send us a note, neil@nhlwraparound.com or Vic at nhlwraparound.com. Send us what you like, what you don't like, what you'd like to see, what you'd like to hear. And reminder that all of our podcasts are on every platform, including Apple, Amazon, iHeart, Spotify, and of course the aforementioned YouTube. Leave a review, subscribe, get your friends to subscribe, tell your friends about it, please. You can also find us on Twitter, which is now called X, Instagram, TikTok, and also at rayD8.tv. That's RAYD8.tv.
Check out our website, NHLWraparound.com, where our entire catalog of shows is available. Patrick Hoffman writes New York Centric for us, and Smith's Picks, which are also available on audio. So we're going to do a little bit of a wraparound here because we did talk about your picks at the beginning of the show. And like the Colorado Avalanche, who have kind of seeked a little bit of a water level here over the last 26 games, they had that real hot streak. And for you, sir, you got close to 200 games over 500, but like the Avalanche, you've kind of leveled out a little bit, and you were 4-4-1 on Tuesday. What gives?
You know, even like we talked about these Colorado Avalanche and Dallas Stars being unpredictable. And so even the most predictable right now at this point in the season are unpredictable. But, you know, sometimes I went with Columbus over Carolina, knowing that Columbus is playing so hard. I was right on that one. I thought the Toronto Maple Leafs would find just a smidgen of pride in a home game where they were wearing St. Patrick's Day uniforms. They went back to using the Toronto St. Pat's uniforms from long ago, and no smidgen of pride came out in that game as the Islanders walked out with a victory. But it's a hard league to predict night after night, and sometimes you get them lucky and sometimes you're not.
Luck of the Irish? Not
on St. Patrick's Day anyway.
No, but there is a little bit of a positive here also, that when you don't go 7-1, at least I don't have to hear about blind squirrels and clocks being right twice a day, or broken clocks for that matter.
Broken clocks, or even a broken clock is right twice a day.
Short shifts coming up on Friday. Enjoy the hockey Wednesday and Thursday. Take care, all.
Thanks for joining us on the NHL Wraparound podcast. Don't forget to subscribe to stay up to date on all the NHL action.